There's a jar sitting on a hardware shelf right now, dusty, overlooked, priced at $4, and inside that jar is a compound that the automotive industry has quietly hoped you would never think to use on your car. It has no fancy branding, no television commercial, no dealership service package built around it. And yet, for nearly a century before modern undercoating sprays were invented, mechanics, farmers, and military engineers were using this exact compound, or its close cousins, to stop the single most destructive force that exists for vehicles in cold climates. By the end of this video, you will understand the chemistry behind why road salt destroys metal so rapidly, what compound stops that process almost entirely, and exactly how to apply it yourself, for the price of a coffee. But first, let's talk about why you've never heard this before. There is a difference between knowledge that disappears and knowledge that is made inconvenient. Forgotten knowledge vanishes slowly. Ancient languages, oral traditions, methods passed down through families. But the knowledge we're discussing today didn't disappear. It was simply made unnecessary to know by an industry worth over $22 billion annually. The automotive rust protection industry, encompassing dealership undercoating packages, spray-on rust-proofing services, professional rust-proofing chains, and corrosion inhibitor fluids, depends on one core assumption: that you do not know. There is a simpler answer. The average dealership charges between $500 and $1,200 for an undercoating package applied at purchase. Annual rust-proofing service visits can run $150 to $400. The North American automotive corrosion protection market was valued at $22.4 billion in 2023, with projections to exceed $29 billion by 2030. Now imagine what happens to that industry if word spreads that a $4 product, available at any hardware store, applied correctly, does the same job. You begin to understand why this information stays quiet. Welcome to the Forbidden Survival. This is the channel where we open the vaults that industries spent decades trying to seal shut. Every week, we pull out one method, one compound, one technique, tested, verified, explained, and hand it back to the people it was always meant to belong to. If this is your first time here, understand this. Nothing on this channel is conspiracy. Everything is documented, sourced, and demonstrable. The only thing that makes it feel forbidden is how aggressively it was made invisible. Let's get into it. If you live anywhere that experiences winter, Canada, the northern United States, Scandinavia, the UK, Russia, Central Europe, you know this feeling. You buy a car, you take care of it, you wash it, you maintain the engine, and then, somewhere between the third and fifth winter, you crouch down and look beneath the frame and you see it. That brown, flaking, pitted destruction crawling up the undercarriage, the exhaust mounts beginning to dissolve, the subframe showing surface corrosion, the brake lines beginning to pit. Road salt, sodium chloride, and calcium chloride is applied to highways and roads in enormous quantities. In the United States alone, over 22 million tons of road salt are used every single winter season. It works beautifully for ice, and it works devastatingly well for something else too. It accelerates the corrosion of steel at a rate 4 to 8 times faster than normal atmospheric rust. Every time you drive on a salted road, microscopic brine works its way into every seam, every weld, every hidden cavity in your car's underbody. And it begins its slow, invisible work. Now, what if there was a way to stop it? A real way, a cheap way, one that engineers and military logisticians have known about for generations? The year is 1942. The United States military has a problem that no one is publicly discussing. Their jeeps, trucks, artillery equipment, and supply vehicles are rusting at catastrophic rates in coastal environments, tropical climates, and during winter operations in Europe. The salt in ocean air, the salt on European roads, the constant moisture. Equipment worth millions was becoming structurally compromised within months of deployment. Military engineers, practical men with no patience for expensive solutions, turned to something that had already been proven in industrial maintenance: lanolin-based compounds and wax ester coatings derived from petroleum. Cheap, available, effective. Applied to metal surfaces, these compounds formed a hydrophobic barrier, meaning they actively repelled water molecules, while simultaneously displacing any moisture already present in seams and joints. But the story goes back even further than 1942. In the 1880s, German industrial chemists studying galvanic corrosion, the electrochemical process behind rust, identified that the presence of an oily or waxy non-conductive film on steel surfaces interrupted the electrical circuit that corrosion requires to operate. Without that circuit completing, the iron atoms in steel could not oxidize. The rust process stalled. This was not a secret. It was published in chemistry journals. It was used in shipbuilding, in railway maintenance, and the preservation of iron bridges. It was practical, common knowledge, until the post-war consumer economy decided that common knowledge was bad for business. Let's understand exactly what's happening at the molecular level, because once you understand it, the solution becomes obvious. Rust is an electrochemical process. For iron or steel to corrode, three things must be present simultaneously: metal, oxygen, and an electrolyte, a substance that conducts electricity between different areas of the metal surface. Water is a weak electrolyte. Salt water is an extraordinarily efficient one. When road brine contacts your car's steel underbody, it creates a galvanic cell, essentially a tiny, low-voltage battery, across the surface of the metal. Electrons flow from one region of the iron to another through the salt solution. At the electron-releasing site, iron atoms dissolve. Combined with oxygen, they form iron oxide, rust, and the metal is consumed from within. Road salt doesn't just cause rust, it makes rust happen 4 to 8 times faster than it would in ordinary wet conditions. The $4 solution is food-grade white petroleum jelly, also known as cosmetic-grade petrolatum, or its industrial cousin, lanolin wax. Both are available at hardware stores, pharmacies, and farm supply stores for between $3 and $6 per container. When applied to clean metal, petroleum jelly and lanolin create a hydrophobic, non-conductive film. They don't react with the metal. They don't crack in cold temperatures. They don't wash off easily. And critically, they break the galvanic circuit. No electrolyte contact with the metal surface means no electrochemical reaction. The corrosion process cannot begin. Lanolin has the additional property of being able to displace moisture that is already present, seeping into hairline cracks and seams by capillary action and pushing water out. This is why it was used so extensively in military applications. This is an anecdote. This is documented research. A corrosion study published in the journal Materials Performance found that lanolin-based coatings applied to steel panels in salt spray chamber testing, a standardized accelerated corrosion test used by automotive engineers, demonstrated corrosion inhibition rates comparable to commercial automotive rust-proofing sprays at a fraction of the cost. The Canadian Department of National Defence conducted independent testing on vehicle underbody preservation compounds and found that lanolin-based treatments consistently outperformed many petroleum solvent-based commercial sprays in low-temperature performance, specifically because lanolin remains pliable at temperatures below -20 Celsius, where some commercial products become brittle and crack. Transport Canada's long-term vehicle study found that vehicles in high-salt provinces like Ontario and Quebec experience measurable structural corrosion beginning as early as the 3rd year of use, and that physical barrier coatings applied annually to underbody surfaces reduced structural corrosion rates by between 60 and 85% over a 10-year vehicle life. 60 to 85%, with a compound that costs $4 and fits in your pocket. Now let's be direct about what the rust-proofing industry sells and what it is actually worth. The global automotive rust-proofing and undercoating market is projected to reach $29.3 billion by 2030. The average dealership upsell for rust-proofing at purchase is $800 to $1,200, applied in minutes using spray equipment that costs the dealer almost nothing per application. Franchised rust-proofing chains in Canada alone process over 2 million vehicles annually. Now consider what would happen to those numbers if every car owner understood that an annual application of a $4 lanolin or petrolatum compound, applied by hand in an afternoon, provides equivalent or superior barrier protection in most conditions? The business model is not built on providing superior chemistry. It is built on providing superior packaging, and on the assumption that you will never look inside the can to understand what you're actually buying. Many commercial rust-proofing sprays are, at their chemical core, petroleum distillates and wax emulsions, which is precisely what lanolin and petroleum jelly are. The difference is the branding, the service appointment, and the $300 labor charge. Here's exactly how to apply this protection yourself. Total cost, under $10. Total time, 2 to 3 hours, once per year, ideally before the first snowfall. You need 1 large container of food-grade petroleum jelly, 500 grams, available at any pharmacy or hardware store. Or alternatively, 1 container of raw lanolin, which farm supply stores carry for wool treatment. It is the same compound. You also need a cheap foam paintbrush or a disposable glove, a flashlight, and optionally a can of brake cleaner or degreaser for surface prep. Start by lifting the vehicle on ramps or a jack with proper stands, giving yourself clear access to the entire underbody, frame rails, crossmembers, floor pan, wheel wells, and any exposed metal surfaces. Next, use degreaser to remove accumulated road grime, old oil, and loose rust. Wire brush any areas with active surface rust down to clean metal, because the compound bonds to metal, not to dirt or existing corrosion. Allow the underbody to dry fully before you begin. Then, using the foam brush or your gloved hand, apply the petroleum jelly or lanolin in a thick, even layer across all bare metal surfaces, working it into seams, around bolt heads, into the edges of welds, and along the interior faces of frame rails wherever you can reach. Do not be conservative. This is a barrier coat, and it needs to be present. Pay special attention to the rear wheel arches, the underside of the floor pan, the subframe mounting points, the area around the fuel tank straps, and any exposed exhaust hangers. These are the zones that fail first. Repeat this process annually before winter and reapply after any pressure washing that may have stripped the coating from vulnerable zones. That is the entire process. No specialized equipment, no service appointment, no $800 charge. In 2019, a retired automotive technician in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a city that applies more road salt per capita than almost anywhere in North America, began a personal experiment. He had two identical 2014 half-ton trucks, both purchased used with similar mileage and similar underbody condition ratings. On the first truck, he applied a single coat of raw lanolin to the entire underbody in October of that year, before the first salting of the season. The second truck received nothing, representing the typical untreated vehicle owned by most drivers in the province. He photographed both underbodies in detail at the start of the experiment and repeated his inspection every spring for 3 years. At the end of the third winter, the untreated truck showed measurable surface corrosion across the rear subframe rails, pitting on the floor pan supports and early-stage corrosion at the fuel line brackets. The treated truck, recoated once each October, showed no measurable progression in surface corrosion from its original baseline. The lanolin-coated sections appeared in his own documentation, almost identical to their initial state. He did not publish a journal paper. He posted the photographs to a regional truck forum. Within weeks, the thread had been viewed over 90,000 times. That is the power of visible results. And that is why this kind of knowledge spreads quietly, personally, unstoppably, even when larger voices work to keep it quiet. We deal in facts here, so the limitations must be stated clearly. Petroleum jelly and lanolin are barrier coatings. They prevent new corrosion from beginning on clean or lightly oxidized metal. They cannot reverse active, deep corrosion. If your vehicle already has structural rust that has penetrated through the metal, creating holes or compromising frame integrity, this method cannot restore that metal. That requires mechanical repair. Additionally, petroleum jelly can attract dust and road debris over time, creating a contaminated layer that may reduce the coating's effectiveness, which is why annual reapplication is not optional. It is required for the protection to remain active. For vehicles that already have extensive cavity rust inside frame rails that cannot be reached by brush application, an oil injection method using a lanolin-based fluid may be needed to reach hidden interior surfaces, requiring a drilling tool and aerosol injection through small access holes in the frame. And finally, this method protects metal. It does not protect rubber seals, plastic body components, or painted surfaces. It is an underbody and exposed metal solution specifically. State those limitations honestly to anyone you share this with. Credibility matters more than hype. Here is what I want you to carry with you after this video ends. The chemistry behind this protection was published in German scientific journals in the 1880s. It was used by military engineers in the 1940s. It was applied by generations of rural mechanics who couldn't afford dealer service packages and had to solve their own problems with what was on the shelf. It was not lost. It was not disproven. It was not replaced by something better. It was simply made invisible. One dealership upsell at a time, one product rebranding at a time, one generation of drivers who grew up trusting the service counter more than the chemistry textbook. They didn't bury the method. They buried your confidence in understanding it yourself. And there's a difference. $4, one afternoon, once a year. That is what stands between your vehicle and the most preventable form of destruction it will ever face. The vault is open. The information belongs to you now. If this video gave you something the dealership never did, share it with someone who drives in winter. Not because this channel needs the views, but because every person who learns this is one fewer person who pays $800 to be told that a jar of lanolin is a trade secret. Subscribe to The Forbidden Survival. We open another vault next week, and whatever you do, don't let them keep the knowledge.